Learn Japanese history. Welcome to this deep dive with your navigators, Taro.
And Hanako, ready to explore a fascinating period.
Today, we're really getting into a time of huge change in Japan. We're looking at the Taisho era shifting into the early Showa period.
Right. And specifically, we'll unpack those big societal shifts and the cultural developments that were happening, especially how cities grew and how mass culture really started to take off.
Yeah, think about it. How did life change as cities just exploded in size? What new opportunities, well, popped up,
Right.
and what challenges came with that?
And what were people doing for fun? What entertainment was emerging? How were they getting their news and information? It's a really dynamic time.
Okay, so let's jump in. First off, this population boom. Between late Meiji and the end of Taisho, Japan's population basically went from around 33 million to 60 million. That's
Yep.
huge.
It really is. And the key thing, like you said, is where these people went. It wasn't just more people in the countryside. A massive chunk flowed into the cities.
Fueling the secondary and tertiary industries, right? Manufacturing, services, that kind of thing.
Exactly. This huge migration wasn't just numbers changing. It was fundamentally reshaping Japanese society. Cities became these powerful magnets.
And to handle everyone, the cities had to physically grow, didn't they? Like spreading outwards.
Oh, absolutely. Residential areas started pushing further and further out into the suburbs.
Which meant people needed ways to get into the city centers for work.
Precisely. And that's where you see commuter trains becoming vital. And also these early buses, the Noriai Jichisha.
It's amazing. This new transport totally redefined daily life for so many people.
Completely changed the rhythm of the city. And the look of the cities changed too. In Tokyo, for instance, you started seeing these big, modern-looking, reinforced concrete buildings.
Yeah, for government offices, companies, public spaces, very different from before. They felt more permanent, more modern.
Definitely symbols of this new era. But it wasn't just the big buildings.
Right, housing changed too.
Yeah, people's homes started changing. You saw more Western-influenced designs, these bunkajutaku or cultural houses, maybe different layouts, different amenities.
And basic utilities becoming more common in the cities, like gas and water.
Exactly. Gas, running water, becoming more standard in urban areas.
Uh-huh.
And interestingly, electric lights started spreading even into some rural areas too.
So that gap between city and country was maybe shrinking a little bit in some ways.
In some ways, yes.
Mm.
And all this urban growth fostered a new kind of worker, the salaryman, the salaryman, white-collar worker.
Their numbers really swelled. And we also saw more women entering the workforce too, didn't we?
Yes, definitely. Filling new kinds of jobs created by this changing economy and society. It was becoming a more diverse workforce.
Now, what I find really interesting is that around the 1920s, the government seems to step in more actively.
How so?
Well, they started trying to tackle the problems that came with this rapid growth. Things like, transportation chaos, housing shortages, even labor issues, looking at them as social policy problems.
That's a crucial point. It wasn't just letting growth happen anymore. There was a shift toward actively managing it, recognizing the government had a role in dealing with the social side effects of industrialization and urbanization.
Thinking more systematically about the well-being of people living in these packed cities.
Exactly. And we can see some really concrete examples of this urban transformation.
Like Tokyo Station, that became such a hub.
A vital artery, yeah. And then there's the Marunouchi building the Marubiro, completed in 1923.
That was huge, wasn't it? American design.
Yep, 8 stories above ground, 2 below. Massive for the time. And get this, it served something like 5,000 commuters every single day.
Wow. That really captures the new scale of city life.
It does. And think about the bus girls, Basugaru, who showed up in Tokyo in 1924.
Oh, yeah, with the red collars, the akari.
That's them. They became really popular, almost like celebrities. Symbols of the modern working woman navigating this new city.
That's a great visual. It really signals changing times, changing roles for women.
Totally. Don't forget telephone operators. Telephone service had been around, but by this time it was overwhelmingly women doing that job.
Connecting businesses, families. Imagine how vital they were for communication in this faster-paced world.
Now, with more universities and specialized schools opening up in the late Taisho period, you see a clearer path for graduates.
Right, becoming government officials or working for companies, the classic salaryman route.
Exactly. A new kind of defined career path for the educated.
And what were they earning? I remember seeing figures like university grads starting around 50 or 60 yen a month.
That's about right, and it's interesting to compare that.
Okay, like compared to?
Well, an average male laborer in heavy industry might make, say, 2 yen 50 cent a day. A carpenter, maybe 3 yen 50 cent a day.
Okay, so doing the math, the monthly salary for a graduate was still higher, but maybe the gap between white collar and blue collar wasn't quite as massive as it might have been earlier in the Meiji era.
Precisely. The gap was narrowing somewhat. It suggests this growing middle segment in the cities with relatively stable incomes.
And what about working women's salaries?
Good question. Figures suggest typists might earn around 40 yen a month, telephone operators maybe 35 yen, office clerks about 30 yen.
Lower than the men, but still, it offered some financial independence, right? And contributed to the city economy.
Absolutely. It gave women a different kind of standing.
So what could you actually buy with this money? Let's get a feel for the cost of living.
Okay, so a shot of rice, which is roughly 1.8 liters or a bit over a kilo and a half, cost about 50 cents.
Half a yen. Okay, what else?
A bottle of beer, maybe 35 cents. Grilled eel, a popular dish, about 30 cents.
How about getting around?
A taxi ride within the city was often a flat rate, maybe 1 yen. A longer trip, like a third-class train from Tokyo to Osaka, was just over 6 yen.
Wow, okay. And just everyday things like postage?
A postcard was 3 cents. A sealed letter, 1 cent, 5 rin. And subscribing to a newspaper for a month would be somewhere between 80 cents and 1 yen.
That really paints a picture, doesn't it? The day-to-day expenses.
It does. And then there's the big one, housing, especially the cities filling up so fast.
Yeah, finding a place must have been tough.
There's a really telling example from Osaka in 1925. The city offered these small, 2-story wooden houses for sale, about 59 square meters, so not huge, on a small plot of land.
Okay, and how much were they?
The down payment was 1420 yen, which was a lot. Then monthly payments of 32 yen for just over 15 years.
Oh, it's demand.
Get this, they had 32 times more applicants than houses available.
32 times. That's insane.
It shows the pressure. And over 70% of those applicants were salarymen.
Really highlights their desire to own a home, to establish themselves in the city, and the sheer competition they faced. Okay, but this era wasn't just about crowded cities and jobs. There was this huge cultural energy too, right? Driven partly by education.
Absolutely. Education was spreading massively. By 1920, compulsory elementary education enrollment was over 99%.
99%. So illiteracy basically plummeted.
Pretty much. This had a huge impact. A more literate population could engage with society in new ways, get different jobs.
And it wasn't just basic education growing, right?
No, the number of kids going on to middle school shot up. And thanks to the University Order of 1918, more universities were established, public and private.
Creating this larger urban intellectual class we mentioned, people hungry for information, for culture.
Exactly, and that hunger fueled a boom in journalism.
Newspapers became massive.
Huge.
Yeah.
Circulation really took off, especially with big events like World War I or the Great Kanto earthquake driving readership. By the mid-1920s, the big papers were printing around 1 million copies a day.
1 million copies. Imagine the influence, shaping public opinion, spreading news instantly.
Immense influence. And alongside newspapers, you had popular monthly magazines appear, selling hundreds of thousands of copies, covering all sorts of topics, fashion, stories, social issues.
Really spreading culture widely, and wasn't publishing becoming cheaper, too?
Yes, in the late 1920s, you started seeing collected literary works and paperback books sold for just 1 yen. Often with little extras included.
1 yen. That made literature so much more accessible to ordinary people. It really democratized culture.
It really did. And then came something truly revolutionary. Radio.
Ah, yes. Broadcasting started in 1925.
A complete game changer for spreading news quickly. Imagine hearing events almost as they happened, everyone listening together. It fostered a new kind of national connection.
They're speaking of popular culture and new trends. We have to mention the moga.
The modern girl, yes. This fashion trend, from late Taisho into early Showa, it was more than just clothes.
It was a statement, right, representing a new kind of female independence, modernity, bobbed hair, Western-style dresses.
Exactly. A very visible symbol of the changing times, and undoubtedly provoked some strong reactions, both positive and negative. Now, all this social and cultural change also stimulated new ways of thinking, new intellectual movements.
Right. In fields like humanities and social sciences, you saw more empirical research, often coming from a liberal perspective. Scholars were looking at Japan and the world differently.
You had some really key figures emerge, like Monobi Tatsukichi.
The legal scholar with the emperor organ theory.
Exactly. Arguing the emperor was an organ of the state, not above it. Widely accepted academically then, though it caused huge political problems later.
And then there was Yanagita Kunio.
the father of Japanese folklore studies, Mizoku Kaku, he focused on the lives and customs of ordinary people, which was a really important shift.
Moving away from just history about elites, what about Surasukichi?
He did groundbreaking work on ancient Japanese history, using really rigorous textual analysis to re-examine the traditional historical accounts. Very empirical.
Challenging some long-held beliefs. And Nishida Kitaro in philosophy.
A truly original thinker. He developed his own philosophical system, blending Eastern traditions, like Zen Buddhism, with Western philosophy. Hugely influential.
So a lot of intellectual ferment. And Japan was making its mark in science too, right?
Definitely. Japanese scientists were gaining global recognition. People like Honda Kutaro, who invented KS magnetic steel, a really important material.
And Noguchi Hideo, famous for his research on yellow fever.
Right. And importantly, Japan was investing in science infrastructure, establishing major research centers like RIKEN, the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, the Aeronautical Research Institute, the Earthquake Research Institute, showing a real national commitment.
And amidst all this, there was another intellectual current gaining ground in the 1920s.
Marxism, yes. Its influence grew,
Yeah.
especially in the humanities and social sciences.
Even liberal economists like Kawakami Hajime started studying Marxist economics.
It shows you the kind of intense intellectual debate happening, exploring different ways to understand and shape society during this period of rapid, sometimes dislocating change. And Taisho wasn't just about ideas, it was humming with technological innovation that you could actually see and use in daily life.
Yeah, lots of new products and companies popping up. And what's interesting is that many weren't the old established Saibatsu, the giant conglomerates.
Exactly. A lot of the dynamic growth in consumer goods came from smaller or medium-sized companies, some of which grew into huge corporations later. It suggests there was real opportunity, a kind of entrepreneurial spirit outside the traditional power structures.
Like the Mazda lamp, that seems like a perfect example.
It is. Tokyo Shibara Electric, which later became Toshiba, started mass-producing these tungsten filament bulbs in 1913. They collaborated with GE.
And called it Mazda after the Zoroastrian god of light. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and they were way better than the old carbon bulbs. Lasted longer, much brighter for the same energy. A real upgrade for homes and businesses.
A genuine improvement in everyday life. And then there's Konosuke Matsushita.
An incredible entrepreneur. Started in 1918 with simple things like an improved attachment plug and a two-way socket. Things people needed.
Small things, but useful. And then he hit it big with that bicycle lamp a few years later, right?
Huge success. Again, focusing on making everyday life safer and more convenient.
And some brands that started then are still huge today, like Morinaga's caramels.
Yeah, box caramels came out in 1913, became a classic treat. And Calpis,
Ah, Calpis, launched in 1919, that lactic acid drink.
said to be inspired by drinks from Mongolia, and its catchphrase, the taste of first love, and that distinctive black and white design, really caught on.
Memorable stuff. And there were others too, right? People laying foundations for big things.
Oh yeah. Toyota Sakichi, with his automatic, looms the precursor to Toyota Motors. Suzuki Saburosuke, who started Ajinomoto. Kurosawa Terizo and Yukijirushi Dairy. Miki Ryoshi, founder of Pilot Pen.
Even things like the Kaminoko Tawashi scrubbing sponge, invented by Nishio Shozaimon, everyday innovations. And this energy definitely spilled over into literature too, lots of different styles emerging.
For sure. You had the Shirokaba school writers like Shigenaya, Mushanakuji Saniatsu. They focused a lot on humanism, the individual's inner world. Quite idealistic in a way.
And then, almost as a contrast, the aestheticism school. Tanizaki, Junichiru, Nagai Kafu.
Right. They were more interested in exploring sensual beauty, complex relationships, sometimes pushing boundaries, looking at love and desire from different angles.
And then came the new realists, like Akutagawa Rinose.
Yeah, Akutagawa took a more rational, maybe even clinical approach.
Yeah.
Very sharp observations of reality, often with irony or deep psychological insight. Intellectual stories.
And reflecting all the social change and labor movements, you also got proletarian literature in the 1920s.
Exactly. This came directly out of the rise of socialist thought. It aimed to give voice to the working class, their struggles, their lives.
Writers like Kobayashi Takiji, his book Kanikosen.
A classic example. It's a brutal depiction of life for workers on a crab canning ship. Really powerful stuff. Yeah. And Tokunaga Sunao was another key figure.
You can almost feel the political currents through the literature. And looking at covers, like for Kanikosen or the Shirokaba magazine, they capture these different moods.
Absolutely. And beyond these, perhaps more literary movements, popular entertainment was also booming.
Like popular novels, stuff people read just for enjoyment.
Huge readership for those. And in theater, You had Shingeki the New Theater.
Trying to be more realistic than traditional forms.
Exactly. More contemporary plays, realistic acting, and actresses like Matsui Sumako became genuine stars. It was a really vibrant cultural scene, catering to all sorts of tastes.
So wrapping this up, it's pretty clear this transition from Taisho into early Showa was just packed with change. Everything feels connected.
It really does. The city's growing, the rise of the salaryman class, the spread of education, the explosion of media, it all fed into each other.
And fueled all this technological innovation and the new cultural forms we've talked about.
Yeah, this era really laid down the tracks for so much of modern Japan. Its society, its culture, you can trace so much back to this period.
It's fascinating. It makes you think, doesn't it? What parts of life for, say, university students in Japan today might have their hidden roots way back in these transformations of the Taisho and early Showa years?
That's a great question to ponder. The echoes are definitely still there if you look for them.